One last thing I will say about foreign policy, because sometimes people say, well, yeah, I kind of like Obama, but he hasn't been in Washington that long. You know, and so I want him to have more foreign policy experience. You know, just remember, you know, when you have that person picking up that phone call at 3 a.m. in the morning, you should ask yourself, who had the judgment to read the intelligence and to weigh the costs and benefits, and who has an understanding of what was going on and what might happen, and was opposed to this war? That's the person that you want. There's only one candidate out of the three left who had enough sense to deal with this Iraq war the way it should have been dealt with. And so, just because you've been there a long time doesn't mean you have good judgment. In fact, the longer you're in Washington sometimes, the less judgment you have. All right. It's a woman's turn. It's a woman's turn. Young lady right there.
Hi, Senator Obama. I want to thank you, first off, my daughter's right there taking a picture of me, for exciting young people like her, she's 11 years old, for causing that kind of excitement. My question to you is, it's something that I've not really heard on a federal level. I've been an advocate for children for 10 years probably, with child abuse and sexual abuse. Problem in our nation, and I don't hear that on a federal level. I don't hear it on a national campaign. And my question to you is, how can we regulate? I don't want to cause this huge government intervention, but how can we regulate the fact that our child protective agencies are understaffed, our children are being molested, our children are being beaten? That goes in. One more thing. One more thing. That goes into our education. That goes into. It follows these children their whole life.
Absolutely. Well, look, first of all, I'm glad that you're advocating on behalf of these children. They need people who are active in the community who care about this issue, so it's terrific. It's true that probably the reason you don't hear that much about it on the campaign trail is because local agencies are responsible for child welfare and protective services. And so usually that's policy that's made at the level. Now, the federal level can help. For example, creating a nationwide database for sex offenders, you know, that's something that's very important so that you can track what's going on and people can't just go across the border and suddenly do the same things that they had done in another state. So there's a role for the federal government to play, but most of the rules and regulations are made at the state level. The big problem we have right now is funding. And the federal government's role should be to deliver to the states the funding that they've promised on other things so that we can free up resources for the states to do a better job on things like child protective services. I'll give you a very concrete example. You know, if we pass No Child Left Behind, we leave the money behind. And it's a school district to have to scramble to spend more money. That's money that could have gone into child protective services. If we say that we're going to reimburse Medicaid at a certain level, but the federal government fails to meet its obligations in Medicaid reimbursement, blows a huge hole in the state budget, then what happens is you start seeing cutbacks in areas like child protective services. So one of the most important things that the federal government can do is to properly fund the programs that it's supposed to fund so that states aren't picking up the tab. They will then have more resources to be able to deal with some of these critical issues. All right? Congratulations on the great job you're doing. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Julius, President of the Muncie Community School Board of Trustees. My question is usual. Hey, that's kind of close to me. Yeah. My question is, along with hers, is dealing with education. What are your plans as president to either change or to fund that No Child Left Behind? Here in Indiana, we're trying to comply with the changes, but there's no funding behind the change to help our children. Could you expound on that?
Yeah. Well, No Child Left Behind had a good idea behind it, which is that every child can learn. I believe that. Every child can learn. And so the slogan, No Child Left Behind, is the right one. But the implementation, the way that the Bush administration went about trying to lift up and improve our schools was poorly conceived. And let me be very specific about two major areas where it failed. Number one, as I said, it did not fund these federal mandates properly. That's not the first time that that's happened. The same thing was true when the federal government said that we're going to fund special education. They promised that they would provide 40% of special education funding. The federal government's never spent more than 18% on special education funding, so local school districts have had to pick up the tab, and that's a huge burden on them. Progress and how you use testing. Look, as I said before, we need the highest standards for our kids, especially in math and science, areas where we're falling behind other countries. So we've got to have high standards. But the way No Child Left Behind did it, they said, all right, we're going to have a single high-stakes standardized test, and we're going to do it sort of somewhere in the middle of the school year. And we're not going to measure progress that was made in that school year. We're just going to test them, and we won't take into account the fact that some kids may start off already behind. Some child may come in 3 years behind. At the end of that school, be 1 year. That school's actually done a really good job. No Child Left Behind, the school's still a failure. They set very high standards in terms of reading scores and math scores for kids who are in special ed, who by definition, according to special ed, are behind, and didn't provide local school districts much flexibility on this. And then schools, instead of getting help, were punished or threatened to be punished if they didn't meet certain test scores. So what ends up happening? What happens is that school administrators, they start telling teachers, all I care about are your test scores. So the teachers, what do? They start teaching to the test. So that means that kids now are just learning how to take tests. They get uninspired. The teachers are uninspired. The schools are constantly worried about funding. And the result is not the kind of school improvement that we'd like. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to change the assessment process. We're going to say to school districts that, we may use a test at the beginning of the year, but it is just going to see where kids are at. And to help teachers, give them a tool to learn. Then during the school year, I want them to teach teaching. I want them to teach what they do best, which is to actually teach literature and math and word problems and all the things that go into teaching and inspiring and exciting students to learn. And we are going to measure the growth that kids make during the course of that school year. And if they are improving during that school year, then that means the school's doing well. And we will reward them. And if they're having problems, then give them assistance, but we don't threaten to take their money away. Now, all that has to be done in conjunction with educators, with teachers, with principals, with school administrators. This is an example of Washington not listening to local school districts before they imposed this plan on local school districts. So it's got to change.